Hi, I'm Angie from Crafts at Home. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make these cute little fabric baby blocks. To start with, you're going to need a range of fabrics. Now I've got 12 different fabrics here. There's a mix of cottons and polycottons, but you could also use fabrics, furs, felts, anything if you wanted to make that different bit of texture, especially if you're making them for a little one to actually play with. So a lot of things that you're going to need, I'm making 6 blocks and they're actually going to spell out a name. So I've already got the name that I want and I've just printed it onto some A4 paper and cut it out. We'll be using that later. I've also got some iron-on interfacing which we'll be using to attach the letters onto the fabric. I've got a nice pink cotton that I'm going to use throughout. I'm also going to be using my rotary cutter and template cutter, just a pair of scissors, some pins, and then to stuff it I'm also going to use this hollow fibre filling. So let's get on to cutting out our fabric. So we're going to make these blocks 3 by 3 inches square. So we actually need to cut to 3.5 inches, so we've got a 1/4 inch seam allowance on all edges. So I've already trimmed my fabric here, so I've got a straight edge. Now with this ruler I've actually got 2 different sides of markings. I've got the black ones which go from this edge, which take 3.5 because you've got the extra 1/2 inch there. Or if you didn't have that and you just had a normal one, then you just go to 3.5 inches on your ruler and cut like that. Now for the whole set of these 6 blocks, you're going to need 36 squares. Because I haven't decided quite how I'm going to put all of my blocks together yet, I'm going to cut a few extra of each one just so as I'm going along I can see how it's going to come together. So that's all I'm going to use of that fabric, and then just to cut it into the blocks I'm just going to turn that edge round so I've got a nice straight edge to work on. And to do that I've just put that line across any of the lines there and take it off, so I've got a nice perfect square there, which is 3.5 inches from there. So turn it round and then cut your blocks out. Again, we'll stick with the 3.5 inches. So just line it up neatly on all corners, press down and cut. So I'm going to carry on doing this until I've got all of my 12 fabrics cut out, and I'll see you back here in a moment. So now we want to prepare all the letters onto the iron-on interfacing. So I'm lucky with this one, and you have to make sure that you get your letters the right way round. So with this, because of the way that we're going to do it, you need to iron this side onto the fabric, peel this backing paper off, and then you turn over and you iron your fabric onto your squares. So you need to make sure that any letters that can't be swapped over either way are drawn the other way, and I've done the L there. So all you do is you simply put your piece of iron-on adhesive on top of your letters, making sure you've got a nice gap in between each, and you just trace around the letter in its entirety, inside and out. You might find, especially with this one that I've got here, because it's more of a mesh that attaches the letters, then it can get a bit bumpy, especially when you're going across. So just make sure that when you do come to cut them out, you cut your letters straight. So now we've done with our template, we just need to cut in between each of our letters. I do it this way so you've got some extra room around the letter to cut around, because if you cut these out, iron them on, then you've got to cut your fabric exactly to that letter that you've already cut out. You might cut a little bit big, you might cut a little bit small, but by doing it this way, you cut both your letter, your fabric and your interfacing all at the same time. So now we've got all of our letters, we bring in the fabric that we're going to use, and all of my letters are going to be on a white fabric. So all you need to do is place your letters on and then iron them over at the ironing board. I'll see you back here in a moment once I've got that done. So I've done the letters so far. Just show you how to cut these out. So you've got your fabric and then you're interfacing with a template. So just nice long strokes just to cut each of the letters out. I will say with the ironing, if you've got a patterned fabric, make sure when you iron your templates onto the fabric that you do it on the wrong side. So when you turn them over to attach to the blocks, all your patterns are on the right side. So I'm just going to finish the V off. Make sure you've got a nice finish in corners. If you need to, just take some small scissors just to get into that tiny V. So I've got that, and because we've got a centre missing in the A like we did the O, all you do with that one is you turn it over and make sure you cut through both the fabric and the interfacing, and then just trim it out really carefully, just so you've got the full letter. And there we are. So if I put them all fabric side up, you've got the 6 letters ready for the next stage. So if we put the letters to the side for now, I'm going to bring all of the fabrics back in. So as you can see, we've got 10 nice fabrics now cut into 3.5-inch squares, so they're all ready to match up. So it's completely up to you now. If you choose your blocks, I tend to do a range depending on each one. That's 4 squares. I'll do a nice rainbow, and then looking at that, I'll put another plane in. So that's 1 block, 3 planes, 2 spotty and a stripe. Now the idea is to make everyone different. So try not to have too much of the same fabric in each one. I'm going to make this an all dotty. So if I move all of these out, then we've got our 6 blocks that we're going to use. So I'm just going to line them all up in front of me. And I'll see you back here in a moment once I've got all these done. So as you can see, I've now got my set of 6 different fabrics for each one. I've also made sure that along each row they're all different. So that row is different, that row is different. That way, if we keep the same order for the blocks at all times, you won't get the blocks where you have the same pattern on the same side of every block. Just mixes it up a bit. So I'm going to take the top one of each, and that's the one that the letter's going to go on to. So that will be my front piece of fabric on each block. So when we've got this done, you need to look at where it will lie in relation to the middle of the block. Now what you can do is actually mark. Now this is an air erasable pen, so it naturally goes off fabric. And what you can do is just mark the centre of each block. Now if I move these out of the way, you can actually see on here, if I go diagonally with this ruler, I've also got a centre line. So if I go diagonally with the ruler and then put that centre line on the corner, I've automatically got the centre of my block. And that way I can piece my letter into the centre. So now it's time to iron them on, and I'll see you over at the ironing board in a moment. So just as a guideline, I've also marked on my piece of paper here where the centre of each letter is, just so I've got a visual to match it up easily onto the piece of paper. So I'm going to put that on the side for me. I'm going to start with the A. I've got my little mark in the middle there. Now with each of these, you'll notice you've still got the paper on the back. Now that paper you need to peel off, but you need to make sure that the mesh is still on the the back of the fabric. So I've still got the mesh on the back of the fabric there. So I'm just going to place it in the middle and then very gently just iron over to stick the letter down. So I'm just going to carry on with these other ones. So before we do much more, I'm going to put the O up there. I'm going to put the L, I, V, I and A back in their original 6 fabric sets, and you'll see why in a moment. So if I bring the other 5 of the O fabric sets, I'm going to keep them in exactly the same order, and that will help you to organise all of your letters. So the way you do it, the first one down, then you put the second one, third one and the fourth one all in a row. The next one goes above the third one and the last one goes below the third one. And that is the rule of thumb for all of your blocks. So I'm going to start pinning these. So I'm going to turn block 1 and 2 pop a couple of pins in. Then I'm going to open that up and marry up block 2 and 3. Open up, marry up block 3 and 4. So that's all the O strip blocks together. Now for now I'm going to put the top and the bottom to one side. And I'm going to put the O's on top of that. Then I'm going to bring in the L blocks. So the way I'm storing them in between, I'm just putting the top block, the bottom block and then the strip. And that's how it's lying on my board ready. So I know next time I'll come and sew these, iron them all open, then when I need to place the next block, I'll block it straight onto there. So I have these 4 pieces that are now pinned together. So the first thing I've done, because every one of these seams is an inset seam, so we need to start and finish 1/4 of an inch from the edge of every single one. So I've gone and I've marked lightly my 1/4 of an inch, just so it's there. So you want to first of all put it in, so you've got 1/4 of an inch seam. Now I've already got a marking onto my sewing machine here. I've got it at the front and I've got it at the back so I can line it up, so I've got it all there ready. And then I have got an automatic needle down position on my sewing machine, but I'm going to do it with the handle anyway, because I want to make sure that I get the vertical and the horizontal axis, which is just there. So I'm now going to pop my presser foot down, put my needle all the way down, then I'm going to sew on 2, 3, 4 stitches, and then I've got a little reverse button here that I just hold down for 3. 1, 2, 3. At this point I'm going to remove that pin and I'm going to sew on till I'm near the next one. So I'm just going to lift my presser foot with my needle down, take out the last pin, and then I'm going to sew on so my needle goes on to that mark that I've made, which is 1/4 of an inch up from the edge. Just to double check, I'll lift my presser foot. So then I'm going to reverse 4 and forward 3. There we go. And that is the first one done for this block. Now I'm actually going to chain piece everything together. So next I'm going to do the L, then I'm going to do the I, the V, the I, the A. I'm going to take all that out and then I'm going to come back through and do the second seam of them all exactly the same, with the 1/4 of an inch instep either side, and the 4 stitches forward, 3 stitches back, and carry on, just to reinforce every corner so we've got a perfect seam ready for our inset stitches. So I will see you soon when I've got all these done. So the next thing we're going to be doing is sewing around the sides of the letters. Now I've done 5 of them already and I'm going to show you how to do it on the L. So I have set my machine up so I'm on a zigzag stitch. The stitch length is 0.4 and the stitch width is 3. I've had a bit of a play and got the right setting for me, so I know it's not too deep for the letters that I'm using, but it's deep enough that it will catch both the white and the fabric with a nice width. So I've got my 2 tails of thread here. I'm just going to feed the L in and then manually pop my needle down. So it's going to the right, so I'm going to pop it to the right of the edge of the fabric. I'm going to put my foot down and then quite slowly sew down. As you can see, I'm just gently guiding the material through. Now I'm coming up to a corner, so you need to think of where you'll finish your needle positioning. So as I'm going to be turning the fabric round, I'm going to the right, so the needle will be to the left, but you need to go over a few stitches so you finish on the white below, and it will become evident in a minute. So I'm now level with the fabric there. I'm taking it a few stitches over and finishing on the left because we're going right. So I'll just lift up my fabric and turn round, and then I'll continue there. So I'm actually at the top of this stitch in here and heading down. Now as we get to the bottom here, because we're going to be going to the left, we want to finish with our needle on the right, and again we want to finish a few stitches off the edge. I'll stop there, lift my foot up and turn around. And we'll do exactly the same here. If I was turning to the left and left the needle at the left, it would mean that we'd actually have a gap. And I can show you on this piece of fabric here. That's what we would have. So you'd go along, you'd be turning left, needle on the left, so you just carry on down that way. So by turning left and having the needle on the right, you then go over, so you've got nice sharp corners each time. So I'm just going to carry on finishing stitching up to this corner. Just going to stop here a moment because you'll notice that we've got the edges left from there. So I'm just going to snip these off quite close to the fabric and do top and bottom. And we're going to finish those edges off when we get round to it. So I'm just going to continue round. So I've now gone all the way around the L and I'm back to where I started. Now if you remember, I just snipped off the edges from the start and we're just going to go over those stitches with a few from this one. It will trap those in. I'm just going to lift our needle and I'll press a foot up. And if we pull out and then snip the thread off, and all we're going to do then, so if you turn it over so you can see the back, pull very lightly and you'll get a loop coming through. If you pull that loop all the way through so you've got both fabrics on the same side. Now all you have to do is put a couple of knots into that thread at the back, could finish off with a tiny bit of fabric glue if you wanted, but I've never had the need to. And then you just snip off your tails. And as you can see, that is our letter finished. As I said, I've got all the other ones done, so I'll see you in a moment. So if we go back to the O, now I've got my O finished on there, so the next thing we're going to do is the two ends, we're just going to sew them together like we have done with all the other edges. So if I pop that back, now we're going to do exactly the same with the stitching. So we just set the 1/4 inch mark, go from the edge, so go forward, 3 back, and then carry on. And again, we're going to stop at the edge, and finish off. So I'm just going to trim those stitches off. And we're going to start doing all of our inset seams. So this pink and white spot material is going to be the top. And you want to set it so it's in between any of the top. But you want to line it up in such a way you have both seams going outwards, right sides together, so you're very much paired up like that. Can be a bit tricky, so make sure you take your time to get all of your seams set in nicely. Now I'm just going to pin those in place. And then we're going to sew the inset seam. So you want to tuck your fabric that you're sewing in. Make sure that seam is nice and flat with the seam away from you. And that's the point that you want to pop in. When you put your needle down, you're going to start where it finished last time. Again, 1/4 inch from the edge and on that seam. Now we're going to do the same here. So 4 forward, 3 back. At this point I'm going to take that first pin out and sew on to the second pin. I'm just going to stop here to make sure that I've got my fabric turned around. It can get a bit fiddly at this stage. So you just want to make sure that you're not sewing over your other fabric, and that your seam here is pointing away. I'm going to take that pin out and sew onto this edge of the stitching here. Four stitches back, 3 forward. And then that is the first of our seams that's set in. So you just want to take that off, and you'll see you've got a natural lie to the next seam. So if you turn it around, pull that quite tight and make sure that your edges line up. If you need to, pop a couple of pins in. You want to make sure you pop that piece out as well. And then we're going to do exactly the same that we did just now. So you're going to start at that cross seam, and sew onto the edge to this seam down here. Four forward, and then go on. Again, I'm going to stop at this point and just make sure that I've got all the unnecessary fabric out of the way before I carry on. So there we've got 2 out of the 4 top inset seams. I'm going to carry on and do this. I'm going to finish off the top one, then I'm going to go and do the bottom one, but you need to make sure to leave one of your edges on your bottom free for stuffing and filling. I'll see you back here soon. So I've now completed the first 5 blocks, so they're all finished, and we're going to finish off this one. So where I left off, you should have attached the top and the bottom, but left the one edge open for filling and sewing up. So we're next going to turn it round the right way, and you just need to make sure that you press each of the corners out, just simply with your nail, just so you get nice edges. You'll have 6 corners to press out. And you just carry on until you've got an empty hollow version of the block the right way around. So we're going to fill this up next. So I've just got a bag of hollow fibre stuffing by the side of me, and literally just push it through the gap. Now I've chosen to make these blocks quite puffy, If you wanted to, you could put a little bit less in, but I find it doesn't fill them as good. So that's why I make sure that I've got plenty in all four corners at the top to start with. As you can see, it actually takes quite a lot to stuff each block. Just need to tease that corner back out, put some stuffing in there at the same time. So I can see that there's quite a gap here that hasn't got stuffing. So grab some more. So we're now getting to a stage where it's looking like the others. It's got nice puffy rounded edges, nice puffy front, and you've got just a little bit at the gap here. So now we're going to sew up the final edge. So I've just taken some of the thread that I've used before for everything else, one of my needles, and I've just double threaded it with a small little knot at the end. So all you need to do is you go in from the back into the corner and just bring the needle out right at the corner. And then you turn your edges in towards each other so you've got a nice flat bent over seam like all the other edges are. And you just need to hold them together as you're working. So I'm going to work on this first piece here. Now you could overstitch. If you were really careful, you could also feed it gently into the sewing machine and just gently go across that seam, but I do prefer to hand stitch this just in this fashion so it's a nice neat finish. So the first thing I'm going to go is into the one side and out a few pieces later, and then I do the same on the other side. So I go in on the pink, across a few millimetres in that seam, and then out. And I carry on to and froing all the way along. Every so often I double check on my seam, I just readjust, so I've still got about that 6mm, 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, just to make it a nice tidy block. So I came out on that fabric, so I'll go in on this fabric opposite where I came out, just run the needle into the seam a few millimetres and then come back out. And I'll just carry on doing this all the way to the edge. So now we're getting towards the end. It gets a bit quicker and easier because the ends are naturally folded over. You don't have to keep readjusting your fingers. So I'll just do the last couple of stitches to the end. You might find as you're sewing that it starts to bunch up, but every so many stitches just pull it straight again and it'll just stop the puckering. So now we've got the last piece to do. I'll just stitch through the same little bit a couple of times, and then on the last stitch you go through, pull it so there's just a small loop and go through that loop 3 times just to finish off and pull to a small knot. Then trim that off. You might find you just need to have a bit of a pull about, a little bit of a flatten just to get it to sit right. And there is the set of 6 blocks. Once you've got to this stage, it's just good just to go over all of the seams, just to make sure that you haven't got any threads caught, which you sometimes do as you're sewing. That one's all clear. Just tidy up any little bits. And there we go. Makes a perfect addition to any nursery. And they can also be used to help spell out the name when they're older. I hope you've enjoyed this video and the baby blocks that we've made. For more information about crafts at home, please see all the information in the description below. Bye for now.